The oxygen monitor beeped steady, too steady, and that was the first thing that felt wrong to Maren Ellison. She had been a pediatric nurse at Street Address Memorial for 6 years, and in that time she had learned to trust the small inconsistencies her body noticed before her brain caught up. The little girl in the bed, no older than 7, sat propped against her pillows with a worn teddy bear clutched to her chest. Her lips faintly blue at the edges despite the mask covering her nose and mouth. Her father stood at the foot of the bed in a tailored black suit that had no business being that clean in a hospital room. His jaw tight, his eyes tracking every move Maren made like she was a threat instead of a caregiver. He hadn't given his name. The chart said Alessandro Conti, but everyone on the floor already knew who Alessandro Conti was, or at least knew enough to lower their voices when his name came up. Maren didn't care about reputations. She cared about the numbers on the monitor, and the numbers on the monitor did not match the child sitting in front of her. The pulse oximeter read 94%, a number that should have meant steady, easy breathing, but the child's chest was working too hard, her nostrils flaring with each inhale, her small fingers gripping the bear tighter every time she drew breath. Something about the mask itself caught Maren's eye, the tubing slightly discolored near the connector, a faint chemical sheen where condensation should have been clear. She had seen a lot of oxygen masks in 6 years. She had never seen one sweat like that. "I need to check the flow rate," Maren said, reaching for the regulator on the tank beside the bed. Alessandro's hand closed around her wrist before she got there, not violently, but with a pressure that left no room for negotiation. "Everything is fine," he said, his accent flattening the words into something closer to a warning than a reassurance. "The doctor already adjusted it." Maren looked past him to the man in the white coat standing near the window, a man she did not recognize from any rotation she had worked, a man whose ID badge was angled just slightly away from the light, just slightly hard to read. Real doctors did not stand that far from their patients. Real doctors did not avoid eye contact with the nurse assigned to the room. She filed the detail away and did not react, because 6 years in this job had taught her that the moment you let your face show what you know, you lose whatever advantage silence still gives you. "I still need to document the current settings for the chart," she said evenly, keeping her voice light, professional, unbothered. "Hospital policy. It only takes a second." Alessandro's grip loosened, not because he trusted her, but because a nurse insisting on paperwork was the least threatening thing in the world to a man used to watching for actual danger. That was his mistake. He was watching for men with guns. He was not watching for a woman with a stethoscope and 11 years of training that went far deeper than her scrubs suggested. What Alessandro Conti did not know, what almost no one on this floor knew, was that Maren Ellison had spent 4 years before nursing school as a combat medic attached to a joint special operations unit, the kind of unit that did not appear on personnel rosters, the kind of unit where you learned to read a room for threats the same way you read a monitor for vitals. She had pulled shrapnel out of soldiers in the dark using nothing but touch and instinct. She had learned to smell certain chemical compounds the way sommeliers learn to smell wine, a skill that had saved lives more than once, and that she had never once mentioned to a single coworker at Street Address Memorial. As she leaned in close to check the tubing, she caught it again, faint but unmistakable, a sweetish, slightly metallic undertone beneath the plastic smell of medical equipment. It was not oxygen. Oxygen had no smell at all. This was something else entirely, something that had been fed into that tank instead of what the label claimed, something that explained exactly why a child on supposed high-flow oxygen was still struggling to breathe, why her lips were still tinged blue, why her small body was fighting a battle the mask was supposed to be helping her win but instead was making so much worse. Maren's mind raced through possibilities with clinical speed, cataloging symptoms, cross-referencing what she knew about compressed gas sabotage from a training she had once received in a country she was not allowed to name. This was not an accident. Accidents did not involve a man in a fake doctor's coat standing 3 feet from the door, positioned exactly where he could block an exit if someone tried to leave with the truth. This was deliberate, targeted, and the target was a 7-year-old girl clutching a teddy bear like it was the only stable thing left in her world. Maren's hands did not shake as she straightened up and smiled gently at the child, telling her everything was going to be fine, that she was going to check on something important and be right back. She meant every word, but the meaning behind them had shifted into something far more dangerous than routine care. Walking toward the door, she felt Alessandro's eyes on her back, felt the fake doctor shift his weight to block her path just slightly, testing whether she would push through or step around. She stepped around, unhurried, because a woman who had once kept her pulse steady while pulling a comrade out of gunfire was not about to let her heart rate spike in a hospital hallway. But the second that door closed behind her, the second she was out of sight of that room, Maren Ellison was already moving, already reaching for her radio, already calculating exactly how many seconds she had before whoever was running this operation realized their mistake, before they understood that the woman they dismissed as just a nurse was about to become the very last person on Earth they wanted paying attention to that little girl's oxygen supply. If you can feel your pulse quicken just from reading this, imagine what happens next when Maren makes her move. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss a single second of what she does to save that child. Because Chapter 2 is where this story truly explodes. Maren did not run. Running would have told anyone watching the security monitors exactly what she suspected, and she needed those extra minutes more than she needed speed. She walked to the nurse's station with the same measured pace she used on every ordinary shift, picked up the internal phone, and dialed a number that had nothing to do with hospital administration. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered, low and alert, a voice that belonged to a man named Derek Holt, her former unit commander who now worked hospital and government security consulting jobs that let him stay close to the kind of danger he had never fully walked away from. "It's Ellison," she said quietly, turning her back to the hallway camera as a reflex from another life. "I need eyes on room 411, and I need them now. Compressed gas tampering, pediatric patient, at least 2 unauthorized individuals on scene, 1 impersonating medical staff." Derek did not waste time asking if she was certain. In the years they had served together, Maren Ellison had never once called in a false alarm, and he was not about to start doubting her now. 10 minutes out, he said. "Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage." Maren almost laughed at that because not engaging was never really an option once a child's life was on the line, and Derek knew that about her too, which was probably why he said it anyway, hoping this once she might actually listen. She returned to the room with a fresh oxygen tank on a cart, moving with the unhurried confidence of routine equipment maintenance, the kind of thing no one questions in a hospital because it happens 100 times a day. Alessandro watched her enter with narrowed eyes, but a nurse pushing a supply cart triggered none of his instincts, because his instincts had been trained to watch for men with weapons, not women with clipboards. "Standard swap," Maren said pleasantly, not waiting for permission this time, disconnecting the compromised tank with practiced efficiency, while keeping her body angled to block the fake doctor's view of exactly what she was doing. She had already palmed a small sample tube from the crash cart, and in one fluid motion that looked like nothing more than tightening a valve, she captured a sample of whatever gas had been feeding into that mask, tucking it into her scrub pocket before either man registered what had happened. The little girl's oxygen saturation began climbing almost immediately once the legitimate tank was connected. 94% creeping up to 96, then 98, her small shoulders visibly relaxing as real oxygen finally reached her lungs. "There we go, sweetheart," Maren said softly, adjusting the mask with gentle hands, watching the child's blue-tinged lips slowly return to a healthier pink. "Just breathe normal for me now." Alessandro's phone buzzed in his pocket, and whatever message flashed across the screen made his expression shift from guarded suspicion to something closer to alarm. He barked something in rapid Italian to the fake doctor, who immediately moved toward the door, and Maren understood in that instant that someone above them had just realized their plan had been discovered, that whatever timeline they had been working against had just collapsed entirely. But collapsing plans made desperate men, and desperate men in hospital rooms with sick children were the most dangerous kind of unpredictable. Alessandro turned toward Maren with a different look now, calculation replacing suspicion, the look of a man deciding whether the nurse in front of him was a witness who needed silencing or a problem who needed containing. "You saw nothing," he said, low and precise, stepping closer than any innocent father would need to. "You checked a tank. That is all." Maren held his gaze without flinching, because 6 years of nursing and 4 years before that had taught her exactly how to stand her ground when someone twice her size decided proximity equaled power. "I checked a tank that someone filled with a compound that was slowly poisoning your daughter," she said, letting every word land with deliberate weight. The question you should be asking right now isn't what I saw. It's who did this to her, and why you didn't notice before I did. That question hit harder than any threat could have, because for all his reputation, all his suits and his silence and his dangerous connections, Alessandro Conti loved his daughter more than he loved his own survival, and the realization that someone inside his own operation had targeted her landed like a physical blow. His posture cracked just slightly, just enough for Marin to see the father underneath the mob boss, and in that fracture she saw her opening. Derek Holt is 3 minutes out with hospital security and 2 federal contacts, she said, bluffing about the timeline but not about the resources, because Derek's version of 10 minutes had always run faster than advertised. You can be the man who cooperates with them, or the man they find standing over evidence of attempted poisoning of a minor. Choose fast. The fake doctor bolted first, sprinting down the hallway only to be intercepted by 2 security guards. Derek had apparently already mobilized before officially arriving, proving once again that his 10 minutes had been generous. Alessandro did not run. He sat down heavily in the chair beside his daughter's bed, put his head in his hands, and for the first time since Marin had walked into that room, looked exactly like what he was underneath everything else. A terrified father who had almost lost the only person in his violent world who mattered to him. When Derek finally arrived with federal agents trailing behind him, Marin was already documenting everything with the precision of someone who had testified in far more dangerous rooms than this one. Her hands steady, her voice calm, her former life folding seamlessly back into the quiet competence of her current one. The little girl, breathing easily now, color fully restored, looked up at Marin with the kind of trust that made every risk worth it. "Are you a real doctor?" she asked. Marin smiled, brushing a strand of hair from the child's forehead. "I'm something better," she said. "I'm the nurse who was paying attention." Alessandro looked at her then with something that wasn't quite gratitude and wasn't quite awe, but sat somewhere painfully human in between. A man who had built an empire on being feared finally understanding what it meant to be saved by someone he had underestimated completely. This is exactly why stories like Marin's need to be told, because the quiet ones, the ones everyone overlooks, are so often the ones standing between danger and the people who can't protect themselves. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel right now and turn on notifications, because every single episode brings you another hidden hero whose courage was hiding in plain sight, and you will not want to miss what comes next.